I'm a timely person. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to this installment of Highlight Conversations. Very excited that I get to be the one to welcome you this evening because we have the amazing Maxine Tate in the hot seat. I'll say more about her in a second. We have 3 members of Highlight, actually 4 members of Highlight on the call. Allison is incognito. Love it that you're listening in. Melissa's here. She's going to help us with the tech. And I'm obviously going to be doing the interviewing of Maxine, and you're going to be pulling some good stuff out of her story so that you guys can learn from her and all of her experience and insight. So cool. What else? So Melissa, let's hear from you about the tech and we'll dive right in.
Hey, everybody. You'll have an opportunity to chat it up and ask your questions, but we'll do that through the chat feature, just so we know everyone knows where that's at. If you can navigate to the chat, it's usually on the bottom. And then you'll see over to the right where you can enter your message. We'd love to know where you guys are calling from and just say hey. So I'll go first. Sweet. So start adding it in so we know everyone knows where it's at.
Boom.
Jersey. There we go. Sweet. And then in that same area, you'll see this little blue button that says everyone with a down arrow. There you'll find a list of everybody attending, and you can private message Mel. You're looking for Melanie Curtis to ask any questions you have, and you can message her at any time during this conversation. If any questions come up, and then she will answer. She'll call you out and ask you to unmute. Otherwise, we'll have you muted throughout the conversation. And that's all from me. Glad everybody's here. Mel, back to you.
Yeah, I love it. And I didn't actually introduce myself. My name is Melanie Curtis, for those of you who don't know me. And like I said, I'm super thrilled to be here and be getting to interview Maxine. So I'm going to read Maxine's short bio first, because I want to hear a little bit. I want you guys to have a little bit of a baseline before we dive into this conversation. So Maxine Tate is the queen of reinvention when it comes to making pivotal changes in her life, such as drastically changing her career, living on several different continents, and competing in multiple different disciplines in skydiving. Originally from the UK, Maxine ditched a career in the city in her mid-30s to become a full-time skydiver, moving around the world and challenging herself to take on several different skydiving disciplines and compete at the world level. So is it a high-risk strategy or a pathway to an exciting, fulfilling life? We will see. Maxine, welcome. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you. It's joyous to be on the other side for a change in the hot seat. So
yeah. So tell us, let's go back to the beginning. So first tell us, how did you find skydiving, and when did your passion or drive for skydiving begin? Maybe they're the same time, maybe they're different. Tell us that story.
Well, God, it's interesting because this is probably a little known fact. I actually made a skydive when I was about 19 years old. And it was a classic. This is like 1989, a long time ago. Back in the UK, people were doing charity skydives, and they involved doing a static line jump with a massive military round, that belly mounted reserve on the front. And I made that skydive. But during that time, it took me about 7 or 8 times going to the drop zone until I actually got to make the jump, because a classic UK situation, the weather was really bad, and there was all sorts of reasons why we couldn't get up. And actually, when I think about it, I don't think I've shared this before either, but there was actually a fatality there one particular weekend when I was there waiting to make my first static line jump. And this was at Headcorn in the UK, and they shut the drop zone down for a few months for the investigation, and then opened it back up. And when I'm literally just reflecting on this right now, I still went back, which is an interesting point where it didn't put me off. I still wanted to go ahead and do it. So it took so long for me to get around to do the first jump, but I was super stoked to do it. But my memory of that jump was very interesting. It was really exciting to jump out of the plane. I had horrible line twists. I couldn't control the canopy because it was this massive military round. I just missed a ditch and I came down really heavily in classic PLF. And I remember thinking at the time, it was wonderful to jump out of a plane, but that was not what I thought the experience was going to be. And in retrospect now, it's because they didn't have any free fall aspects. Like there was very little control. It felt like I was really didn't have much input in it. And I'm like, I don't think I want to do that again and again and again. I'm glad that I checked the box, but I moved on. And then that was like at the age of 19, I guess. So I went on with my life, went through, finished college, went to work in the city and all the rest of it. And I took a career break, and I was traveling around, this is 2004 now, traveling around New Zealand, and was passing Lake Taupo, which is this beautiful place on the North Island, and saw a tandem parachute in the air. Was like, well, that doesn't look anything like that crappy big military round that I had to go on. That looks interesting. And so I literally stopped my journey, went to the drop zone, checked it out, and thought, okay, this looks different. I'm watching people come down properly, flare, landing, all the control. This is what I thought skydiving was going to be like. So I signed up on the spot, and I went and made a skydive. And that was my first tandem. 15 years later, wow. So there's a big gap in between. And I came down and I was exhilarated. I'm like, that's exactly what I thought it was going to be. The thrill of the free fall, the control under the parachute, like the whole thing, like every other person that's done a tandem skydive. And that, I'm so glad I saw that from the bus or wherever I was at the time, because I got back to the UK at the end of that career break. And I called up a really good friend of mine, Alex, and said, do you want to learn to skydive? Let's go do it. He's a send it kind of guy, very sandy. He's like, yeah, for sure, book it up. And I ended up on a flight to Madrid in that same year to get my license. And I went to Skydive Leo and did my AFF there. And it wasn't plain sailing, that's a whole other story, but I got through it. And after I was a spinner, classic spinner on load on my level 4, but worked through it and got my license, came back to the UK, and that was it. That was like a major change in me in the mentality of what I felt like I wanted to be doing now, because I've discovered this new thing that gave me everything that we know skydiving gives to you, that feeling of freedom, all the rest of it.
Yeah.
And I came back and went hard. Started to look up everywhere that I could get involved more in skydiving. And within 100 jumps, I got invited on a 4-way team. And in that very first year, started doing 4-way. This is how much I wanted to learn. It was the very first year that Bedford had their big tunnel competition. So Bedford is a massive 16-foot tunnel in the UK. And they have something called the Bedford Challenge. It was the very first year. And I'm like, yeah, I want to compete. I want to do that. I want to learn, because I was all in. I drunk the Kool-Aid at that point. And it was an open competition. 100 jumps, just started doing 4-way, found some friends who wanted to do it, sat down with the Deland Magic video, learned all of the blocks and the randoms. Like crazy when I think about it. I can't even remember that stuff anymore.
And
but
that's
I literally
that's from a level 4 spinner
yeah,
to
sure.
I'm gonna have 100 jumps, and I'm gonna participate in a competition in this community that I really want to be involved in and more deeply involved in. Very, very cool.
Yeah, in a full dive pool as well. And we did, when we had fun. It wasn't, it's not like we didn't go break any records. But to me, it was just. It was like suddenly I had so much to learn that was in front of me that I didn't have before. And I was like lit up at the time. And I think also for me, the point I was at in my career was I've been working super hard. I had this great career going on and on the rise. But at some point in that same time frame, I started to realize that in the hustle culture that exists, so it certainly existed at the time, people had this mentality that they took all of their time. The time was a way to be able to accumulate more and more money. Mm. And I think I got to the point in my career where I was doing really well and becoming quite successful and what have you, but I was getting less and less time to do the things I wanted to. And I began to realize that was the wrong way round. Mm. That in fact, what I wanted where I wanted my life to go was that the money was a means of giving me time. It was the tool to generate time in my life. And so at the same time that I got lit up with skydiving, I was offered a really big promotion with a new company in a very prestigious position in the film and television industry. And I had to make a really big decision. If I go down that route and commit to that, then I'll be pushing this big career and what have you. And yeah, I'll be financially stable, all the rest of it, but I'll have no time again. And I had this other big shiny thing on the other side, which is like, oh, that's what happens when you actually do something you're super passionate about. And where does that even lead to? And I had no idea at that point, because I was still 2 years in.
Yeah,
and I had to make the decision, which way do we go, And to the surprise of most people around me, I was like, I'm done with the career in the city. That doesn't actually fulfill me anymore. but I have no idea what's over here, and I'm into it.
Yeah.
I'm
I mean,
into it. I'm going to go there.
Talk about bold, brave, right? We're in the business of being bold and brave, right? And we're in this conversation tonight to unpack that a bit. So you met this moment in your life and you're like, you know what? I'm having a recognition, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm having a recognition that this is not for me. The details, what's going to come out of this choice, I don't think is for me. And I'd rather choose into something that is unknown to me, which is also scary.
Yeah.
So that speaks volumes toward the bold, brave life. But go ahead, say more.
Well, yes and no. So, I mean, for me, and I think about this, like, what does a bold, brave life mean? And for me, I think you can make a very bold decision, and to enact it is brave if you don't have a guaranteed outcome, because that's the unknown. And for me, when I look at that time in my life, I feel like it was a bold decision, but it didn't feel brave because I don't think I felt it was risky. People are like, "Are you crazy? You just literally did that."
I'm like,
but
wow.
Here's why.
Youthful enthusiasm.
Well, I wasn't that young at the time. This is like 34 years old or something like that. But the reason is that I fully believed in my ability to be able to pick up and do anything, regardless of the outcome. So at that point, I'm 15 years into a financial career. I was the equivalent of a qualified CPA. I had a lot of experience running business. Like I knew my stuff by then, you know what I mean? So I had no doubt that if it didn't work over here, I am very employable. I can make money. I could get a job. It may not be to my heart's desire, and I certainly have just kicked the career to the curb, but I'm good. You know what I mean? So it didn't feel to me like I had that loss of stability by making that move into skydiving. So for me personally, it didn't feel that brave. It felt like a pretty bold move, but maybe not so brave.
Yeah, that's cool. I mean, that's worth noting. I think it's worth noting, Maxine, because you had already in your life experience up to that point outside of skydiving cultivated this depth of knowing and capability in yourself.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between competence and confidence. You had a high level of confidence in yourself and your ability to navigate challenges and to learn and grow. And okay, you don't have competence in the lane of skydiving, but you have high confidence that you'll be able to get there, which obviously you did. So I'd like to, for people that don't know your story in skydiving, give us a little bit of the bullet points. How many jumps do you have? What have you achieved? Like, do it sort of in bullets so we can get a sense for how far you've come from spinning at level 4 and being a 100 jump wonder, joining a freaking 4-way comp, which is awesome, to where you are now.
I've been in the sport for almost 20 years now. I have about 10,000 jumps. I am a canopy coach with Flight One. I also ran the company for 10 years. I'm one of the owners. That's another whole story there. I also, my other side hustle, which is really my true passionate hustle, is being on highlight and being a demo jumper. I've had a 17-year competition history, of which I have represented 3 different countries in 3 different disciplines. And I just hung up my hat as a professional competitor this year. And that decision has got a lot of in common with the decision I made to leave my career, which is the big question: what makes me feel fulfilled? Mm-hmm. And this is something which I know I need to keep asking myself. So we can, what fulfills us in this time, right here, right now, may not be the same in 3, 4, 5 years time, or even in a year's time. And it's very easy to find something that you feel very connected to, and like, this is working for me now. But if you don't check in with yourself on a regular basis, you may find yourself on a path which no longer gives you the fulfillment that you need. Mm-hmm. And I feel like, as I reflect back on some of the big changes I've made in my life, it's because I've consistently asked the question, am I still on the right path for who I want to be and where I want to go? And does this still make me happy and fulfilled? And is this where I still want to be? And I've been very happy to take up and just go in a different direction, because I feel that I'm pulled in another place or another environment. And you and I are big fans of Adam Grant. This is one of the biggest messages I took out of his book, Think Again, which is brilliant, is that in the same way that when we're in a career, you know, in a work career, we'll have an annual review, and we'll sit down with our people and be like, how do you feel? How have you done? Etc. when do we ever do that with ourselves to make sure that we're still on a path to fulfillment? That sounds very,
yeah.
I don't know,
Yeah.
big,
I
but
mean,
you know what I mean?
like you said, I mean, I think sometimes we have intentional moments where we're like, oh, I haven't asked this question in a while. I have this as a process in my life. I'm going to continue to ask it periodically. And other times we have an emotional charge where we're like, whoa, I'm recognizing I am unfulfilled, or I'm heading towards something that doesn't feel as good or as fulfilling as it once did, which is very normal, totally common. So what I want to ask you about next is, you have a lot of success in your story. You have a lot of success. And I'm curious, what, if any, were there any moments of quote unquote failure or perceptible challenge that maybe, you know what I mean? Like, what is something you can tell us about that maybe you don't perceive it as a failure? Like, I don't even really believe in that word at all, honestly, personally. But that premise of that, something that was challenging or that would maybe in the short term be considered a failure, and how did you navigate that and work through it? What did you learn?
I embrace failure. And it's so funny because the word failure to me is part of the process of success. So failure is a necessary integral part of success. You don't start something and get it first time and then move on to the next thing and get it. So have I had failure in my life? Every freaking day, and I absolutely love it. Why? Because that's how I learn. Like, everything I've done is about learning. I have a desire to be the sponge, get into the room and be the sponge. And so the choices that I've made throughout my skydiving career is to put myself in a room with people who are far more experienced than me. And that's the place where I'm the happiest and that I can learn the most. And it's not a place where a lot of people feel comfortable, because you have to be more into the learning than into being the big fish in the little pond. To me, that's a waste of time. So have I had failure? Yeah, at every single freaking day of my life, I feel like, at every turn. Like, if I look back at the speed skydiving, I had days when I sucked massively. I'm like, oh God. And then I have to remind myself that nobody learns in a linear fashion. So even if you start to make an improvement, then it doesn't go well, that's part of the process. So it's fail, a little less, succeed, fail, whatever, up and down like that. And I'm into it. Like, I'm here for it. To me, I even remember having times during my journey of trying to learn to speed skydive where I was like, it's the process. We're in the process. It's okay. You know, like, trying to be kind to myself when I was really having a sucky day. I'm like, I've got to remind myself of the things I tell other people. I'm like, today's just a crappy day. We'll wake up tomorrow and try and be a little bit better, you know? So all the time. And how I deal with it is that I realize that it's part of the process. I trust the process, and I just try and be a little bit better the next day.
Yeah.
You
and
know?
Peeps, team, everybody who's on this call, feel free genuinely to type into the chat and shoot over some questions. Like, I don't need to call you out and have you speak if you don't want to. Just type it into the chat, and I can ask Maxine for you. So just please feel free to put anything that you're curious about in there, whether it's a public post or whether it's something to me privately. So Maxine,
can I mention one more thing about failure, though? Because to me, it's just such a rich conversation, because it's such a paralyzing thing for so many people when they have this almost like a fear of failure. And the first thing, I think I probably see two types of the fear of failure, if we want to call it that. The first would be the failure in your own eyes. So those days I talked about, I'm like, it's a crappy day. I'm going really slowly, you know? Those days is when I remind myself that the process is there, and to be kind to myself and just keep going, because the success comes from consistency. And the consistency is showing up and doing the work. It's not consistently getting better and better. All right. So for anyone who has that fear of failure in the back of their mind, chill. You're on a journey, and trust the journey. But what I see a lot of the time, especially as a canopy coach, is people having this fear of failure in the eyes of their peers or the eyes of others. I've had so many instances when I see someone landing in the landing area over there. I'm like, why are you landing over there? why don't you go to the main area? I don't want anyone to see my landing. Why not? Oh, you know, because if I have a bad landing, I'm going to get the blah, blah, blah from the beer line and all the rest of it. And I get that. But honestly, I don't really care what other people think about my landing and what have you. And there's a lot to be said for recognizing that there may be people who give it a little bit of that, but they're not thinking about your landing half an hour on. You know what I mean? The only person thinking about your landing is you. And also to recognize that when people do pass judgment like that, they have no idea what you're doing or why you might have had an outcome like you did. So I can think of a really good example for me personally. I was working on, this is when I was still swooping down into land, myself and one of my teammates were working on new turns. So we're adding rotation. And we did a 3-day camp with JMO. And the two of us planed out high every single time because we were trying to work out the mechanics of this much bigger, powerful turn, right? And you're not going to do it and get your perfect swoop straight off because we're training. That's the whole point. And the comments that came in from the beer line when we were coming off again, like, oh, no, I'm having a great day, you know, all that kind of stuff. And my answer is always the same. We're training. That's why we call it training, just training. And they don't know any of the background, and it's their opinions somewhat irrelevant. So understanding a little bit to let that go and let the fear of failure in the eyes of others be meaningless to you is really something to strive for. I know it's not easy, but it's good when you get there.
Yeah, well, and that's the one side of the coin in terms of the mental game of achieving at a high level, right?
Yeah.
And doing big things and focusing on goals and all of that stuff. The other side of the coin, a lot of people talk about having and feeling this notion of imposter syndrome. I'd be curious, where have you experienced that? What has brought that up for you, and say more about that?
Well, I was listening to one of Brené Brown's podcasts the other day, and I love her question she has at the end in Dare to Lead. She says, complete the sentence, vulnerability is. And it was a episode with someone, I think it was Maya Shankar, and she said, vulnerability is being able to admit when you are good at something. And that, I had to sit with it for a moment because that really hits home for me, and I'm sure a lot of other people. You know, we all have our unique traits, we all have our unique skills. And the whole concept of imposter syndrome, which is something I have to deal a lot with when I make myself the least experienced person in the room, is can you genuinely come up and take your seat at the table with a bunch of people around you who are far more experienced than you and understand and appreciate and acknowledge the value that you bring that they don't have. And that takes courage, it takes a certain amount of confidence, and it's quite hard to do. But let me share this, the latest example I had of this, which I think really helped me nail it on the head moving forward, is with Highlight. And I feel like you'll remember the moment because it was such a big moment for everybody. The first time we got together, we were doing a training camp in Arizona. This is January 2020. And we had one of the little conference rooms off the side there. You guys were just in for Project 19. And we all came in and we all sat around the table, and it was palpable. We were all like, you know, we're looking around the room at this extraordinary talent that was in the room. And I knew probably half the people well, and half I knew but didn't know very well. And there was a couple I didn't. But I'm like, it's Sammy and Sarah, it's Gabby Bell. You know, like it was very much like that. And I'm like, I'm a good skydiver. And I was like, oh, you know, feeling it a bit. And in conversations with the team after that, we all mentioned having imposter syndrome with each other, which is so funny to me now. What changed for me is working together as a team. I recognized where my experience was in areas where other people didn't have it. And working in that team in such an environment where everybody was humble enough to say, I don't have any experience with this, can you help me? Made me realize the value that I brought in the areas where people were asking me for help. And of course, I'm asking people left, right, and center, I don't know how to do this, help me, please. And that environment in that team where everybody has what I love to call, I've shared this with you, confident humility, the idea that you have confidence in the area that you do so well, but that you have the humility to be able to say, I don't know how to do this, can you help? Generates a team for me where we raise each other up to the competence and the skill set that we bring to the table. And I feel like everybody on the team has said the same thing. I now can see in retrospect that when I sit at that table with all of these badasses, it's, I understand why I'm there now. And I can say that with confidence without being a dick about it.
Yeah,
You know what
absolutely.
I mean?
There's a difference between arrogance and awareness.
Yes.
Those are not the same things. It's
Yeah.
interesting and very palpable and powerful and beautiful to be around anyone who has nothing to prove.
Yes.
It's like
God.
you can really work together in that space. And I think I love how you're pointing to that. The confident humility seems to be a real thread and highlight in our culture. And I just love that for myself too, because I get to experience it and it's just so wonderful. I'm curious.
But it's an important thing to get over. Like for me, imposter syndrome is the way that we can create opportunity as individuals to take a seat at whatever that table is, be surrounded by extraordinary people and still belong there. And as we go into whatever might come in our lives, and hopefully with working together, and whether it's activism, whatever it is, being able to understand and appreciate who the best self is that you bring to that table is everything, because it opens up all sorts of spaces that may not have been there before.
Yeah. Well, and one thing I want to definitely ask you about is this idea of going from a goals-based life to a values-based life.
Yes.
And because it's not that we don't want to have goals, right? Like, because there's so much that we can learn and extract from our experiences and the things that we want to go after, right? We have a curiosity, a calling, and intuition for a reason. So that's good. You have a life path, you're learning that. But say more about this sort of shifting focus and lens that you're putting on your life choices. Like, why is that? And what does that look like for you?
I heard the saying recently, which I feel like it was almost written for me at this point in my life right now. And it says, if you want to go fast, walk alone. But if you want to go far, walk together. And I've been going fast for a really long time, And I'm at the point now where I'm called to go far and to contribute in a way that I feel like that's possible. So I'm now trying to reach out in collaboration with other people to see what's possible. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I'm more about us trying to figure out who my identity is right now, and what kind of person I would like to be, and who I want to strive to be. And this is like another great book I read recently, James Clear, Atomic Habits. He talks about, instead of trying to create a goal, ask yourself what kind of person do you want to be, and then everything you do in the interim is based on that. So for example, I went to the grocery store today. This is a really good way that I did it. This is how I beat myself up. What kind of person do I want to be by either picking up the carrots or the macadamia nut cookies? And it's like, oh God, I'm the crappy person again today. Yesterday I wasn't with carrots, but you know what I mean? It's a way that you can implement everything you do. I think he says every action you take is a vote towards the kind of person you want to be. I love that idea as a way to try and question what you want to do in life, So for me, I can take it back to a moment that you and I both had on a plane heading to our first training camp, where I'm trying to decide if I want to do this, 1 year, 2 year project to become a speed skydiver and learn something from scratch.
Yep.
Like, I think I want to do this. I think I see value in it, not for the outcome, but for the journey. Like, I want to try and learn something completely from scratch. I've never flown on my head, never done a vertical discipline. I know I can go fast in a track with a booty suit, but I think it'll be a great challenge. So I feel like I want to test the learning process of where I've learned other things and put it towards something I've started from ground zero. So I think there's value in that. And I think the reason why I really, really want to do it is I want to share the journey, because to me, the reason why more people aren't empowered to try things outside their comfort zone is because we don't share what it's like to take the journey and the importance of the journey. And so I said to you, what do you think? Ooh, sorry, that's my earphone. I said, I'm going to talk and move at the same time. What do you think? Do you think I don't often multitask anymore, but boom, look at that.
Love it. That's math skills right there, people. You're welcome. Maxine Tate in the house.
I was like, I think this is a value for me and also for the community. And what should I do? And your answer was always ask yourself whether it serves your core values. And that gave me, it was a very generic response to a very specific problem, but it was a perfect response because I've actually used it in all sorts of different ways since then. Does this serve me? Does it serve what I want to do? Is it going to fulfill me? And does it serve the work being my core values?
Yeah.
And I have found that such a fulfilling way to live compared to, I want to do this event next year. And I'm like, what? Okay, but why? Why? It's the why.
Why? Yeah, but why?
So I feel like I'm living more to the why nowadays than anything else. And that leads me to like my biggest quest right now is, wouldn't it be a wonderful place if we all brought our best selves to the table to work together? Mm-hmm. What is my best self? And that's kind of like it's a big mission I've been going down this year to try and figure out. I know how I feel about a lot of things. I have some pretty strong opinions, but I don't really have the language or the framework to understand how and why. Yeah. And is that my best self? And is that what I bring to the table? Mm-hmm. And so it's been a very interesting journey to try and do that. And it's based on an identity-based life, not a goals life for events and stuff like that.
Well, just like any other quote unquote goal, just determining and defining our core values is a goal as well.
Yep.
Is a process. It takes time. It takes iteration, just like learning how to jump a big flag. Oh, it was scary at first and now it's not so scary. Oh, why? Because I've done it a few times and I was a little bit less scared each time I've done it. Love that, Maxine, for a frame of outside of the specificity. Again, if we're talking about translating what we get from skydiving and translating what we learn from our lives and these big goals that we take on, I want to go back to something more granular because Allison asked a question in the chat and I want to make sure we get to it, but I think it will be actually kind of nice to see something a little bit more specific balanced with this bigger conceptual conversation that we're having. Yeah. So she's asking, so she's like, okay, it's so inspiring that you have competed in crew and in canopy piloting. So what challenges did you have going from one canopy discipline to the other, if any?
Well, it's interesting. I'm a firm believer in cross training. And I feel like one of my strengths, I'm going to be confident in my strength here, one is that I learn well. And by that, I mean, I can take a piece of information that I've been given and I can apply it to all sorts of different scenarios. So it's like learning smart, same thing as training smart. And I think one of my teammates from crew is on the call right now. Hi, Julia. I was swooping and I wanted to learn all sorts of different ways to fly. Like I'm just addicted to flying, right? And in swooping, we try and learn to fly in the most efficient, the smoothest way possible to maximize power. And crew dogs, they fly dirty, like really dirty, you know what I mean? And it's interesting because I've watched people like Brian Pangburn, who's a Flight 1 instructor, fly, and some of the stuff you can get some of the canopies to do on a military course. I was like, oh, dang, that's a whole other level of skills that I haven't seen before. So myself, my teammate, as it was going to be Albert Birchtold, who our USPA ED, wanted to try crew to find out what more we could learn just as a way to cross-train and have some fun doing something different. So yeah, I mean, it wasn't challenging at all. It was just super fun. And then we delved in, we did like 50, 60 jumps and went to nationals, and Julia came and filmed us. It was so funny. I got to share this. Her comment when she first started filming us, because, crew dogs, they slam into each other. Of course, Albert and I are doing with a little bit more finesse as being swoopers. And she's like,
I'm like, don't touch me.
Yeah, she got down and we moved really fast, and then we wouldn't really connect for a little while. And she's like, why are you taking so long? Like, just get in there. So maybe we still have stuff to learn, but it was perfect. Like it was complementary in the same way that I started angle flying when I was learning speed skydiving, because I needed to learn how to be able to have control in a much steeper orientation. So I'm all about it. That's, I think, one of the reasons why I love doing so many different sports or skydiving disciplines, is that they're super complementary. And it's just fun to learn something new,
Absolutely. Fun. And the deeper you get into anything, the more nuance you understand is a part of something. It's like, that's what's kind of cool about anything, doing anything at a high level or anything with depth, is that there's so much more to it than meets the eye. Like for anything, literally anything we could talk about. I have another question that is just came in, and I'm just going to ask it directly.
Yeah.
Do you have any advice for someone who might be struggling with confidence? So not only in skydiving, but in general, because you've said a lot about being confident. You haven't said a lot necessarily about how to cultivate that confidence and where you sourced that. So tell us more about that.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, a lot of this and a lot of the confidence, so it might come from a lack of, or something that's fearful to begin with, but confidence comes as a result of consistency. Consistency comes as a result of repetition. And this is really part of the learning process. So firstly, you've got to start. Let's say you're learning a new discipline. All right. The first thing you've got to just go make that jump. Let's say it's canopy skills, just to keep it in my wheelhouse. You go make the jump. It may be a little fearful to begin with, but you make the jump, you try something. It maybe works, maybe it doesn't. Failure is part of success, right?
Right.
But it's still a little fearful. It's still a little outside your comfort zone. So it doesn't help with the confidence, but you go and do it again. Second time round, maybe you're a little bit better. Maybe you're not, because as we said, learning is not linear, right? But you've done it again. So it's familiar for the second time. And hello, numbers games, like the repetition, when you do something more and more and more, the fear starts to go away and the familiarity starts to rise. Okay. And this is the journey, if you like, from being outside your comfort zone to eventually inside your comfort zone. And when you repeat something enough, you'll get to the point of familiarity and consistency. Consistency is where the trust comes in. You trust yourself, you trust your performance, it feels more routine, and trust breeds confidence. Yeah. And so there's no shortcut. It is the learning process. And when you get to the point where you have confidence because you've done it enough that it now feels like routine, that is the gateway to growth. Yeah. And that is the learning process that I love so much, that I keep taking in my little framework and moving along to the next thing, and recognizing that it's all based in the numbers, in showing up and having the discipline to go back and do it again and again, even if it doesn't work out very well, as long as you can get past that apprehension to begin.
Yeah, for sure. Oh God, there's this documentary that I love. It's called Dying Laughing. And it's basically about comedians. And it's in this incredible section about how they bomb, and how one of a younger comedian asked Gary Shandling one time, he was like, come on, man, there's gotta be a shortcut. There's gotta be, like, how do I get in there? How do I do it? And he's like, it's like, there's no shortcut. Like,
there really isn't.
Yeah.
And so many people, sorry, go ahead.
No, go.
I was going to say, there isn't a shortcut. And I feel like, and this is a little bit of a cultural thing as well, it's counterculture right now. We have this way that people want to generate a goal for a length of time, like 7-day detox, 30 days, lose your weight, and then back to normal. It's like that shit does not work. It does not work. It's the small changes that have great consequences. I think actually it might have been Eliana that said that in the very first episode. It's the silent work that we do in those small moments that add up to something. And that's not your Insta story. It's not the stuff you see on YouTube. It's the ones that are showing up in the background and keep doing the hard work, which is all the more reason why I wanted to share the journey of learning a new discipline. I was like, honestly, close to 500 jumps deep before I went to the competition. It was a lot of freaking work, and it wasn't easy. And it was, I had days when I sucked and days when I was awesome, and then days that were somewhere in between.
How do you stay accountable, Maxine? Because you're talking about something like, this is great. This is great advice. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And then there comes a point where people are like, all right, cool. I'm going to do what Maxine said. I'm going to iterate. I'm going to show up, and then we're met with those emotions, where we're met with the fear, we're met with the discomfort, we're met with the ruminating thoughts, we're met with whatever might want to get in our way. And how do you how do you move through that stuff? So it's sort of a two-tiered question. Accountability
Yeah,
is
no, I
sort
get
of
it.
a higher tier, and the fear around it, and how do you move through that fear?
Yeah.
Or where does that show up for you? That's sort of the deeper part, but go either direction
Yeah.
for us.
Well, I think first we start off probably when something's not, we haven't done it before, there's a position of fear, especially with skydiving. You can actually hurt yourself pretty badly skydiving, as we all know, right? That fear to me is I try and quantify if it's like perceived fear or real fear, you know. Or for example, what's the extent of the fear? If I use a non-skydiving idea for to begin with, the first time I ever dived off a board into a pool, I was scared, you know what, like so scared. I go, what's going to happen? And when I look back at it now, and it took me a while to have the courage to literally dive off as a kid, as young, whatever. And I'm like, I don't know what's going to happen to me. Like, nothing's going to happen. You belly flop at the worst, right? This is when some degree of relativity comes in. Like, I'm not going to die. I'm just going to get wet. I might look stupid and I might have a belly flop, whatever. And eventually, once you put some kind of like rationality to what that actual fear is, hopefully you can do it for the first time. And you know what? You're probably going to do it scared. That's the reality of it. Like, you can't necessarily make the fear go away. You're probably going to do it scared. You're going to survive. You're going to get out the pool, go up to the diving board again, and you're still going to be scared, but you're going to be a little less scared. Welcome to the repetition, you know? Yeah. So the first thing to say is you got to start, and you're probably going to start scared. Yeah, but it's a little less scary second time around. And so when it comes to the accountability, yeah, look, no one's going to show up and make you get on that plane every day. You have to be accountable to yourself. And there's a really big difference between motivation and discipline. This is something that's talked about a lot in the podcast by athletes, you know. And by that, I mean, I can be very motivated to train hard. But there's days when I just don't want to go do it. You know, there's days when I'm just freaking tired. My body hurts. My body hurt a lot in the speed skydiving. Whoa, you know, and how do you, it's the motivation is not going to make you go train or make you go to the gym, but the discipline is. And so this is getting back to the idea of how do you create the systems in order to achieve the goals. And we're back in James Clear territory here. He said, his famous quote is, you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems, which is another way of saying you can have this. It's easy to make a goal, but you have to think long and hard about the systems you create to get you there. Yeah, so that they're sustainable. And those systems are made up of all the little habits along the way. And it's more important to generate a habit and then optimize it than try and do it all in one. So I'll get back to a fitness example because it's the easiest one. And he actually uses it in his book and it's just perfect. So I'm going to use it. There was a dude that he worked with who he was very overweight, like obesely overweight. So he had a big fitness and weight loss journey to use. And he, for the first 2 or 3 weeks of that journey, he went to the gym on the designated days. He went through the door, he did 1 minute on the treadmill and he left. And he did it for 2 or 3 weeks to develop the habit. And the comment was the heaviest weight in the gym is the weight of the door. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Like you have to develop the habit. Then you try and optimize it. So then from then his journey took him to going in and doing 2 minutes because he was already in the routine of going to the gym.
Beautiful.
You see what I mean?
Love that. And the heaviest weight in the gym is the door. Boom.
I know.
Bam. That's going on a meme
sound
after
bite.
this.
Ding, ding, ding. Anyway, but the point is, like, you have to develop habits which are sustainable, and that's the whole point of Atomic Habits, that you can show up to and have the discipline to do every single day. Yeah. So that's what it is, you know, it's creating the smaller changes that add up to the big difference. And also, more importantly, recognizing that it is a long-term journey. You know, impatience and ambition are the things that kill a journey. And ultimately recognizing, I think, that the journey is actually the biggest reward, not the outcome. And if you're, absolutely. I mean, I know, honey, trust the journey. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, you know, I'm a believer.
I know. I'm preaching to the choir here. But if you see the reward and the value in the journey, even sometimes more than the outcome, then that helps with the discipline. Take it slow and do it over a long time. You know,
you said earlier that you have gone fast, and you meant that as a metaphor of doing a lot alone. You are obviously a mentor in skydiving, clearly mentoring a bunch of people and being a leader in the sport and an example of possibility, which is totally freaking beautiful and wonderful. And you're amazing. Why I bring that up is I'm curious who was influential on your path. Who were your mentors? What did they do for you? How did they help you such that you've maybe taken that and done that in your own kind of career or not? I don't know. I'm very curious what your experience was with others and how they helped you along your path as well.
I think I'll probably use the example of Flight One for sure. Like I turned up at Flight One. I was there. They needed someone who could grow the business. So they invited me in as the chief operating officer, CFO, whatever. And like that was my superpower for them. But I was an okay canopy pilot. Yeah, good coach, but not okay under canopy, nothing special. I was bumming around on my velo doing nothing special. You know what I mean? And I remember what I loved about that time there was that was another example of me putting myself in, surrounded by experience. And the example they showed me was to allow me to grow as a canopy pilot and as a canopy coach and become one of their integral members of the instructor cadre as well, by giving me the gift of their knowledge. And that to me is the best example that I've had people show me, because for me now, I'm so extremely grateful to have the knowledge that I have from Flight One as an instructor, that framework that I can gift to other people. And because ultimately so many people can fly their canopy well, but very few people can actually put the language behind what they're doing and how to repeat it and how to give it to someone so that they can actually take it and charge with it. And so that's one of the areas where I think I have the deepest gratitude to be able to give that as a gift to someone else, because knowledge is a gift.
Yeah.
And I'm so happy that I can do that. And I do it based on and I continue to do it outside of canopy piloting based on the example and the generosity of my business partners and my colleagues at Fly One.
Awesome. And you're right. Not every world champion is a good coach. There are two different skill sets.
Yeah.
And I mean that. I totally mean that.
Totally.
One of my best coaches in the world, whenever it's my turn, I'm sure I'll talk about him, but Louis Shoney, he's not a world champion. He struggled to even be good at belly flying. And he was an exceptional coach because he's a professor and he knew how to teach and all of this. Anyway, what advice would you give people who want to grow as a coach and be a good communicator in that way? What works for you? What advice would you give to people who want to become coaches?
Oh, that's interesting. I feel like some of the greatest skills and of being a good coach is firstly and most importantly to listen, and also to learn. Like I go into every coaching environment asking questions, actually not giving advice. Like to me, the whole point of really a good coach is to get down to the absolute root cause of whatever it is that's causing someone a problem, and the reason why they're having a problem. You can have two people with exactly the same issue, something in their landing, let's say, but you have no idea what's got them there. And so my advice to anyone who would like to be a good coach is that don't jump to helping someone until you have the full story, the absolute full story. In the same way that those beer line chit chatters don't have the full story and they jump to judgment. If you want to be a good coach, let your person speak and then say, tell me more. Why did that happen? Get to the bottom of it, and then bring your gift of experience and knowledge to them to see if you can make a lasting change.
That's a beautiful, beautiful, actionable piece of advice, is bringing that curiosity and that specific turn of phrase, tell me more. Yeah. It's very open-ended, awesome. Very, very, that's like such a really specific takeaway for people who are listening. I love that. Yeah. And we're going to go to a specific question. Carlos just posted in the chat. He says, can you learn to swoop without getting hurt? What would you say to that?
Can you? Sure. Is it likely? No. I mean, say more. ultimately, learning to swoop is to learn to increase risk into your landing, to learn to induce speed. And when you learn to swoop, that's the time that you are actually probably the most likely to be at risk of injury. Because firstly, from an overconfident standpoint, I've had way too many people say to me, oh, I'm a really conservative canopy pilot, I'm not going to do anything crazy.
And let me just interject, Maxine, in case there are new jumpers watching this recording back, or anybody that's newer on the call, swooping is flying your parachute at a high rate of speed near the ground. So go ahead.
High performance landings are literally defined as deliberately inducing speed into your landing to be able to go fast and far across the ground. There's no such thing as a conservative swooper or someone who's conservative under canopy and learning that reduces the risk to zero. We can't imagine when we start swooping that we can make such a dire mistake that we're going to hurt ourselves. And we also don't know what an impending injury looks like. You don't have the sight picture of when you are too low. And so that doesn't happen till it actually happens for the first time. So, I mean, swooping is wonderful. I did it for years and years. I still swoop. I still fly very high performance parachutes. And I've been injured. And in fact, some of my injuries have been when I was learning, because I didn't recognize that I was low until it was too late. Mm-hmm. So can you? Sure. I mean, I think I know one or two canopy pilots that have never been injured, but that's it. So ultimately, now I don't want to discourage people from learning. If it's their jam, I teach so many people to swoop. You just have to recognize that you're going into an increased risk environment. You should absolutely take coaching. You should not be in a hurry to get onto small canopies. It's much better to develop your skill than to try and change canopy. Downsizing does not improve your swooping abilities. Take it slow, take advice, and be cognizant of the risk you're putting yourself in.
Okay, well, I love that, all of it. I love all of everything pretty much the entire time, obviously. What is next for you? You know, so you've made this big decision and you have this framework about you're really making decisions from your core values, thinking about what is an intentional life for me. Maybe it's skydiving, maybe it's not. I'm just more curious about what's next for you and why. Well, if you want to share, no pressure.
Yeah,
I have plenty of other questions I can ask.
Yeah, no, I love this because it's probably, I can bring into probably what's being one of my biggest aha moments is, you know, I've been on this journey of trying to understand who is my best self that I want to bring to the table. Highlight has given us such an extraordinary opportunity to use skydiving as a metaphor to reach out to people, not just in skydiving, but beyond, with these more conceptual messages about living a more intentional life and everything we've been talking about. And right now, and so I see definitely the work we do at Highlight as being a wonderful outlet for that kind of thing. And I'm beginning to understand a bit more of what my best self is within the environment of Highlight and even without, which is my ability for creative thinking. And for everybody else outside Mel and Melissa, I hit up Mel and Amy all the time. And like my favorite sentence is, wouldn't it be cool if we did? Ding, 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 ding. Like Mel gets all the videos like, I'm caffeinated, I've got another idea. You know, it all comes from that. And what I've realized from another piece of extraordinary reading recently is that my superpower is actually being an introvert. And I say that because, like, under the work of Susan Cain, who wrote about, she wrote a book called Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Doesn't Stop Talking. She noted that introverts require solitude to create the space for creative thinking. And all this time, whenever I want to get something figured out in my head, I go on a hike, because I put myself in solitude, in a creative environment where there's nature. I never wear earphones or listen to music or anything. I just walk. And as I'm on this hike, it's almost like the scene from Minority Report, if you remember that, with Tom Cruise, where he's basically got all the stuff there in front of him. He's like, ding, 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 ding. And that's my mind when I'm in that kind of environment. It starts to see the possibilities. It starts to see the connections. And that's when my ability to see possibilities really comes to the fore. And, you know, all this time I'm like, oh, I'm introverted, like, but I want to work with people. Like, I don't really understand which way this is going. And I think the work of Susan Cain's made me realize that she says introverts have that, the superpower is their ability for creative thinking in these solitary spaces. So now where I'm going is trying to combine that very powerful skill set and ideas-based thinking and bring that to the table to work with others. And so that's where I'm working right now, is to continue to try and advance that sort of skill set that I have and see what's possible with it in and outside of skydiving. So that's where I'm at right now.
Maxine, that's powerful. My friend Allison Holzer just did a TED Talk about unstructured time. So whether you're introverted or extroverted, there is scientific evidence to support that we need disengaged time in order to access that creativity. And certainly others have it more powerfully than others, you know what I mean? So it varies person to person for sure, but you're speaking to something very powerful and very actionable, again, for people that are listening to this call. Now, last chance for questions, guys. We're coming up to the end. We're getting close. I
felt very validated.
What?
I felt very validated when I heard this work from Susan Cain, because I'm like,
you
know, you can feel like you're trying to, in a world where we're trying to engage to work together to be more than the sum of our parts. Is it okay to be introverted and to be able to have that time and space? And now I feel entirely validated with it. So it's important to understand who and why your best self is, and that's where I'm at right now.
Totally. And Maxine, you're serving as a very amazing, powerful example of a voracious continuing learner. You are reading, you've mentioned how many books tonight, you've mentioned how many people that people should look up. That is powerful stuff. That is a powerful way to be in your life, to be enlivened and to be engaged and to be growing and going up and to the right in the, you know, ascending sine wave that we hope our lives become. I love that.
And a lot of it's been inspired by even some of the stuff you put up online. I'm like, the amount of times you see something, you're like, oh, that's it. That's the thing. And then you share it and you go, this, you know, it's, that's really what's, that's what really sparked my curiosity. So, you know, to go down this route more.
I love it. Rabbit holes. Oh my God. I'm like voracious.
The best rabbit holes.
I'm ridiculously voracious for continuing education. Don't even get me started. Last thing I'm going to ask you in the last 60 seconds, what is one of the biggest gifts that skydiving has given you?
You know what? I mean, it's given me the gift of community, of the fact that I have some great passion and I can make a living out of it. But I'm actually going to go down a slightly different route. It might take more than 60 seconds, but just to do something slightly different. I've been thinking a lot about life being in balance, the yin and yang, or the bittersweet, as Susan Cain calls it. And it made me realize that one of the most greatest gifts of a lesson came from a really nasty part of skydiving, which was probably the worst accident I had. And I haven't had that many bad ones, but I broke a tib fib after an XRW jump on the landing. And that was bitter. But the sweet of it made me recognize and understand that I need help. And it forced me to ask for help. And I can now ask for help. I can accept it. I'm still struggling with not feeling guilty about accepting it. But that lesson, the bitter of the sweet of the bitter, if you like, I now recognize was actually one of the most valuable lessons I've learned from in my adult life from an injury. So there's a slightly different answer, but there you go.
Maxine, you are a champion in every respect, in all definitions of the word. Thank you for all of your sharing from your heart, from your real and true self. Thank you very, very much. Thank you everyone for joining. We love you. The next installment of this highlight conversation will be coming soon. Follow us on Instagram at Highlight Skydiving, on Facebook as well at Highlight Skydiving. And just we're grateful that you spent your time and energy with us as always. And we love you so much.
Yay! Oh, it's in the air.
Bye, team.